All right. All right. Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here this evening for another presentation for the Acalanes Union High School District Wellness Parent Education Series. My name is Amelia Whalen. I'm the Wellness Coordinator at Las Lomas High School. And tonight, Jamie Rich, who's a program specialist from Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and April Rivero, who's president of the National Coalition Against Prescription Drug Abuse, will be presenting the power of parents navigating substance use and the fentanyl epidemic with your team. Thank you both very much for being here to discuss this important topic. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And thank you everyone so much for attending.
Thank you, Amelia. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to get right started. Amelia already introduced me. Yes, work for MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, which some of you may be familiar with from the San Francisco Bay Area affiliate. We're in 9 counties in the Bay Area, and I will get started. So this is the Power of Parents presentation that I'm going to deliver to you. We're going to talk about some specifics about marijuana and alcohol. And really the most important part about this presentation is just to emphasize how important you as a parent or an adult in a young person's life, how important you are in a young person's choice to use or not use substances, that you have a big influence on that. You're going to see in a few slides, this is kind of a unique presentation, that you're actually going to log on to a site, and then you will be answering a few questions, but that's going to come up in a little bit because I want to hear from all of you too. So for those of you who are out there, if you could please first fill out this pre-survey, just go onto the QR code and take a moment and fill out this pre-survey, and I'll wait a moment. Okay, I'm going to go on, but you please do, if you're just in the middle of filling it out, keep filling it out. It really helps me with my reporting and my grant deliverables. So thank you for that. So MADS, Mother Against Drunk Driving, Underage Drinking Prevention Programs, we have 2 programs that are hand in hand, the Power of Parents and the Power of Youth. So Power of Parents, we deliver to, again, any adult population. Even though the name is parents, it doesn't have to be parents. I'm going to be presenting at a conference that's all for teachers. So it's really just for an adult that is in a young person's life. The Power of Youth presentation covers some of the same stuff that we're going to be talking about in this Power of Parents presentation, some of the general information, and then goes more in depth into some of it. And this presentation can be delivered to any young people, students. I've gone into clubs, into youth groups, just to get the information out. So MAD's mission is to end drunk driving. It's a pretty big mission, right? To have no more victims of this violent crime. And underneath the main mission of ending drunk driving is to help fight drug driving, prevent underage drinking, which is what is near and dear to my heart, like the one I'm most passionate about, and also to support the victims of this violent crime. We call them victims and survivors, people who have been touched by a drunk driving crash of some way. Either they lost someone in a crash, or somebody was hurt, or they themselves were hurt. And notice that I call it a crash and not an accident. I learned this early on. Sorry, there was a little bug flying. front of my face. When I started working for MAD, I've worked for MAD a little over a year, that we don't call it an accident because someone made an informed choice to get behind the wheel of a vehicle and drive impaired. So it is a crash and not an accident. So this is where, if those of you are logged on, and I will see people that are out there, if you can log on to ahaslides.com/XTE6Z and then answer this question: what do you think causes underage substance use? And I can see on my screen as people log on. And if no one logs on, we will move on, but I'll give it a minute. And all these answers are anonymous, just so you know. It's an opportunity to share thoughts in an anonymous fashion. So that's why I really like this platform. So it's just, what do you think? What do you think causes underage substance use? Peer pressure, depression, insecurity, boredom, stress, social pressure. All answers that make a lot of sense. Inattentive parents. All, again, good answers. And what I like to share is, so when I do the presentation for young people, I ask the same question: what causes underage substance use? They actually come up with a lot of the same answers that you've just given. Peer pressure is a biggie. Coping for the environment that we're in right now. To have fun, they say parent influence comes up. Alcoholic in the house, yep. Mental health issues, all really good answers. And they really come up with a lot of the same answers that you are all coming up. Self-medicating, they'll call it coping, stress, depression, anxiety. Yep. These are all answers that make a lot of sense. So thank you for sharing, and kind of interesting to know that you're pretty much on par with what young people say are the reasons young people are using. So underage drinking, April is going to follow me and talk about a very pressing and current issue. And we hear about a lot of drugs out there. And sometimes alcohol gets kind of like thrown, oh, passe, like we don't really think about it. But kids are still drinking, students are drinking. It is still the #1 drug of choice for almost every school district out there is alcohol, including the last checked Alkalani's Union School District. Last time I checked the California Healthy Kids Survey, it's still alcohol. And teen alcohol use kills more than 4,300 youth each year. And the human brain is not fully developed until mid-20s. This is something that we talk about a lot in the Power of Youth presentation. Don't go into it as much here, but young people actually really like the science aspect, and to understand that taking in substances during this delicate phase, when your mind is still developing and your brain is still developing and forming, there are consequences in the moment and there are consequences long lasting. So that's why it's so important to get in early, talk to them early, talk to you early. Speaking of early, if you read this thing, this little graphic underneath, your kids are weighing the pros and cons of drinking alcohol starting at age 8 and every day after that. So they're watching, they're listening, they're looking, and they are trying to decide, is it a cool thing to do? Is it a good thing to do? We'll talk about this a little more about, again, how important it is as a parent, as a trusted adult, what kind of messages you are sending when it comes to alcohol use. So again, just some general statistics just to show how prevalent this issue still is. 503 alcohol attributable deaths under age 21. This is in 2018. 125 traffic fatalities, including 15 to 20-year-old drivers with a blood alcohol content of more than 0.01. When I'm with young people, I ask them, so what is the accepted blood alcohol content that you can have and be driving? And I want them all to say 0. And they usually do, they know this, but they can't have anything. It's not 0.08, it's 0. They cannot have anything in their system. So very good for them to understand. We also talk about the consequences of drunk driving and how it can really impact your life. So I, in my past, before I came to MAD, I facilitated 2 Contra Costa County funded coalitions to reduce underage substance use. And I would talk to all the stakeholders in the community, parents being one of them. So I heard a lot from parents about what they were doing in the home, what their beliefs were. And I definitely heard quite a few times in my 13 years of doing that, well, it's fine, they drink in the basement, I take away the keys, they'll be fine. And although it is Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and that would seem to be what we concentrate on, if you see here, traffic deaths are the biggest part of this pie chart, 32%. But homicides, violent behavior, assault is 30%. So when young people are drinking, even if they're under your roof and they're down in the basement, they still can be doing risky behavior, consequences, things will still happen, even if they don't get behind the wheel of a car. Their suicide ideation happens as they drink more and get more depressed. They can have poisoning with other substances. They, of course, it's going to wreck with their coordination, so they can fall. So really just to drive home the point that it isn't such a great idea to just be okay with, I'm going to have a party down in the basement, I take away their keys, it's fine, because a lot other things can happen in that basement. So we're going to talk a little bit about marijuana. I've talked about marijuana for about 15 years out in the community. So I spoke a lot about it before it even became legal. And of course, the environment around marijuana has changed a lot in the last 5 years or so because it has become legal. So we say that it's become normalized. Young people see it, it's legal. It's got to be not that bad for you. It's everywhere, I did one survey, spoke to one group of students at a high school and asked them, as far as substance use, what are they seeing mostly on their campus? And heard over and over, oh, the smell of weed in the halls, the smell like just on the campus. So if they think, it's all around them, not a big deal, so they're going to do it, and they're going to do it more and think it's just a nothing to do. Also, when I used to speak on marijuana, there would be a debate in the audience as to whether it was addictive or not. And now there is no debate. It is an addictive substance because it hits the 3 main criteria for being an addictive substance. When you're a regular user, you become physiologically dependent on it, psychologically dependent, and when you stop using, you go into withdrawal. So there's no more debate about that anymore. 1 in 6 people who start using marijuana in their teens will become addicted. This is a pretty big number. In 2018, over 4.4 million people were diagnosed with a substance use disorder, specifically to marijuana. So that was what landed them in a treatment center. Also, when you speak to hard drug users, are already gone down a not so great path, and you ask them, what did you start with? And I've seen these testimonials and I've seen people speak, it's almost always marijuana. If not alcohol, it's marijuana, what they start with. So it isn't a benign substance, is the main thing to drive home. So what happens? What are some of the negative effects of marijuana in young people? We definitely see a decline in school performance, more dropping out. there can be an IQ loss of up to 6 points with a regular user, which might sound like nothing, but it can be the make or break between a young person doing well in the SAT, passing a class, getting to that college that they want to get into. Also, what we see is, so we all of us have THC receptors in our brain. And what I do when I'm speaking to students is I ask them, what is it you like to do? And I hear video games, playing sports, hanging out with my friends, listening to music. So when they're doing these things, or all of us, whatever you like to do, when you're experiencing pleasure from these things, you ping your THC receptors. It's just normal. It's natural. It's what happens. But when someone is smoking a lot of weed, what happens is they overload these THC receptors. And so what we see in young people, because they're more susceptible to this and having this overload, is that the things that used to make them happy, like that, hanging out with friends, playing sports, playing music, even playing video games, just doesn't do it anymore. It doesn't make them happy. So we see a kid who's checked out, hanging out on the couch, and just really looking for the next dose or hit of marijuana that they can get. So it's kind of sad, but it's also due to how potent the marijuana is now that these things are happening. Also, an increased risk of mental health issues like depression and anxiety, which is a little bit of an oxymoron for some, because a lot of people think, including young people, well, I smoke weed to chill out, to calm down. Well, in young people, it often has the opposite effect. It can make them more anxious, more depressed, more prone to schizophrenia. So it doesn't have that calming down, chilling out effect on the long term when they've been using. And as far as driving, there's a myth out there that some people might say, and sometimes I think everyone on the highway thinks this, because I swear you can't drive on the freeway without smelling a car going by with marijuana, that people might say, well, I drive better high, I can focus more. And it is a drug. Marijuana is a drug, so it's going to alter your perception of reality. So that car in front of you is going to seem farther away or closer or next to you. It really slows down your reaction times to signals like stop signs and traffic signals and someone stopping in front of you. So it's definitely not a nothing or a good thing to drive with. So a lot of times we think of like, well, what about the peers? Like a lot of you, the first thing that came up, and again, it comes up with young people as to why are young people using, is because of peer pressure. So middle and high schoolers tend to often, this whole thing with normalization, think that everyone's drinking and everyone is drinking a lot. And again, going back to that California Healthy Kids survey, which especially when I was working in community coalitions was my data point. And in the Acalanes Union School District, they take it every other year. And it is self-reporting other things besides substance use, but it does ask them about their current use. And it is never more than 50%. Any report I've ever seen, it's never more than 50%. So a lot of people will say, and I agree with this, like, how can you really trust that? And, are they telling the truth? But mainly, the main thing to understand is that it's often not the majority that are drinking, even if it seems like that. And even if it seems like that's what your child or young person thinks. So these common misperceptions that it's normal to drink, that everyone around me is drinking, gives them more pressure to fit in and be like, well, if everyone's doing, I got to do that around me. And it leads to more teen drinking. So it's just a bad circle of events. So just real quickly, I talked a lot about the Power of Youth presentation and how we work with young people. There are a lot of resources on the MAD website, mad.org, and on it is the Power of Youth booklet that I encourage all of you just to share it with the young person in your life. We actually at Las Lomas, it's the one school now that I'm working with and have for a couple years that we actually have a teen influencer group. It's the peer-to-peer club at Las Lomas, which I started with the nurse 2 years ago, but they're also a mad teen influencer group. We're very proud of them. They've done some great things. So if you're interested in this, getting your student involved, you can contact me. You can contact Amelia. We meet once every 2 weeks, and they're really working to change the culture around substance use on their campus. So it's great to see. So some of the misperceptions of adults, and these are things, again, that I have heard. I told you, I worked with a lot of parents, is that letting teens drink at home takes away the mystery of alcohol. Well, I'm going to let them just have it in front of me. I've also heard I'm going to let them get drunk with me so that they see what it's like to get drunk. I'd rather they get drunk with me. And I had one woman on my coalition say, I think her son was going off to college, and I want to increase his tolerance before he goes to college. So these aren't the best messages to send across to your kid or to the young person in your life, all because they're not going to understand the mixed messages. So like, it's okay to provide alcohol at a special occasion or a birthday. They're just going to go, hey, my parent lets me drink, so it's got to be okay. For the most part, they're not going to really separate. Oh yeah, friends, I only get to drink because it's my dad's birthday. To compare yourself that, well, I drank or I used weed and I turned out okay. We're all different. You don't know what's going to affect your child the same way or a different way than it affected you. Plus, as I pointed to before, the marijuana of today is nothing like the marijuana of 10, 20, 30 years ago. It is so much more potent, so many more forms that you can use it in, that it's leads to a lot more problems. So on what I just said, so a lot of research shows if teens are permitted to drink in the home, even a little bit, they end up drinking more, they drink more often, and they have more consequences and problems, of course, from drinking. They're seeing that it's okay. And, so it's okay to do wherever and whenever I want. You really can't teach your child how to drink responsibly. It's again, they're not really going to pick up on that. I can only drink this much. So I'm going to either put in the chat or provide to Amelia somehow our parent handbooks, either virtually or I'll bring some in. They're really great booklets. They talk about understanding adolescent development, social pressures, increasing freedoms, really what's going on in your child's life. Because in order to be armed and be able to talk to them, you need to know what they're going through and what they're feeling and thinking. And so actually doing some research or looking at their world helps before you approach them. Also, to look a little bit into what kind of parent are you? What kind of parenting styles do you use? The authoritarian parent, the parent who gives orders like my way or the highway, you do what I want or you're out of this house, often doesn't work very well. This can lead to actually more drinking, more rebellion. I actually asked young people too in my presentation, the same sort of where they can put in their answers. How should your parents start the conversation with you? And they say non-judgmental, open, honest, be prepared to listen, don't be angry. So those are just some things, some food for thought to think about. The overprotective parent, also, I raised my kids in La Marinda, and I ran a coalition in La Marinda. And one thing I saw a lot was parents swooping in so that their children did not have to suffer consequences of whatever it is they'd done, use, whatever it was, so that they wouldn't lose that scholarship, would still get into that college. And they're not going to learn from this unless they suffer the consequences of their actions and they learn from it. The kids will be kids attitude. I've heard that a lot. They all do it. It's just part of growing up, throwing up your hands. This doesn't work very well either. It's a little bit of on the parent side, we're all busy, and it's a little bit of the kind of checking out and letting them do what they want to do. The best is the positive and authoritative parenting style. So using your authority to strengthen and protect, like let them know you are there to keep them safe, not control them, but to have a trusting relationship with them so that they'll come to you with concerns. You can also come to them and be honest with them. And you might all be saying, oh, this is great to hear, but how the heck do I do that? And it's, again, the earlier you start, I have to say, the easier and the better. And I know here we are talking about high school, but formulating habits early on, so it's what they're used to. Every month I have this talk with my parents about like what's going on at school and what's happening with substance use, rather than like as a parent of a senior coming in and going, so I need to know now, like, what are you doing and what's happening with alcohol use on your campus? They might be like, what? You've never asked me before. So try to get it as a normal part of the conversation. I always say, the best place, I think we've already all heard this, to have this conversation is in the car, because they can't go anywhere. They're captive. And you don't even have to look at them. You can be in the front seat driving. So I heard one thing that's happening at the school, I've heard something about, and April's going to talk about this, about fentanyl. Like, have you heard anything about this? And just have an open conversation with them. Or I heard there was a party over the weekend, and wow, some people seem to have gotten drunk. Like, did you hear anything? What's going on with this? What's your thoughts on this? So have a give and take. And this again is in the parent handbook. So we already talked about this, about the marijuana of today is so different from before. Young people will often think it's nothing. What's the big deal? It's natural. Everyone's using it. But you can go to the science and tell them how different it is and how potent and how they really can suffer consequences of use now, and how it can be addictive. So again, these are other things that are just in the parent handbook. And while April's talking, I will try to get it in the chat. I say try because the last presentation I did, for some reason I couldn't load it in there. So one way or another, I'll make these available to you. But these are some of the things that it talks about. A lot about, really important is to teach ways for them to get out of unsafe situations when it comes to getting in the car with an impaired driver. This sometimes can be an adult. It can be a trusted adult. What's the plan? What should they do? Something I've heard from families is that they have a code word, or a code sentence, like the child can call and say, so how's the vet appointment? How did it go with the dog? And you don't have a dog. And if they say this, that they're in trouble. They need to be, picked up or something. So to have a plan before you're in the situation, because then emotions are running high, risks are taken. But if you set the plan before, a really good way to go. And they know that trust you. They know you're a safe outlet. They just need to know the specifics about it. So again, this is really to drive home. You might think, my kids aren't listening to me. They don't care what I think. Well, it's really not true. And even when we ask them, it's not true. They don't want to disappoint you. They are very concerned about what you think of them. And if you're proud of them, you really are the leading influence in their choice to use or not use. So it's something that you want to just remember and take in. So also, your teens are listening to your behavior around substances and what you say. So if you come home and you've had a stressful day, I don't want to even talk to you, I need a drink. They're going to say, oh, drink, coping. And they're going to take that in. While if you turned it around and you said, oh gosh, I've had the worst day at work, I got to go take a walk. Or I'd love to sit and talk with you because I think I'll feel better. They really are paying attention to what you're saying and what your behavior is around substances. So I just have 2 other questions for you to jump in and answer and hope that we can learn from each other. What challenges are you facing in starting the conversation about drugs with your teen? And again, you're going to log on to that same site for those of you who haven't yet, ahaslides.com/XTE6Z. That's very good. Don't know what the right time is without feeling awkward. I think there are probably a lot of parents who feel the same way you do. How to establish zero tolerance without making them want to defy you and use more. A lot of times what works is, I was kind of surprised, is the science aspect. Tell them how much it affects their brain, how it can affect what's important to them now, like sports, or music or drama or doing well academically, and how that can really have an effect. As far as the right time without it feeling awkward, I'm telling you, in the car is a good way to go. You just say no drugs. So hopefully this has worked, and it's like something you've established earlier on so that they know this is your policy. This is the family policy. I can't do it. Get a response of not wanting to tell on a friend, so won't speak deeper. You could ask in more general terms, maybe kind of what's going on in the school. What are you hearing? So they don't have to use names. They don't have to tell you about a specific friend, but just so you get an idea of the environment and really an idea of their take on it. You know, what are their thoughts? What are their struggles? What are their challenges? So you can address them. How do you get them trust it'll be okay if they call you in a situation? Just by really sending that message home and home and home. I am here for you. My number one is that you're safe. You don't have to pretend that you won't possibly be a little angry in the moment, but that the number one thing is call you, no questions asked at that moment. Just, I'm going to come pick you up because I care what happens to you and your friend, however you want to do it. But it's just kind of saying that over and over. So turning it around a little bit on a more of a positive note, what has worked to start the conversation about drugs with your teen? So again, we can all learn from each other. Oh no, nothing's worked. That's why you're all here, which is fine. So it makes total sense. One thing I found, so I have 2 adult children now, which I can't believe I have 2 adult children. But what really got to my daughter, and I kind of said this in the last one, is when she knew she disappointed me. She did not want to disappoint me. So using that, just a very personal, I was disappointed that you couldn't tell me the truth. Yeah, that's a great answer. Talk to my son after I attended OIS, because you're just coming from a factual stance then. Like, I just went to this presentation. Like, I encourage you after tonight, go back, talk to the children in your life, the young people, and tell them what you learned and open up the conversation. Because then you also come armed with information and research, because they can tell when you don't know what you're talking about. And if you come and you know what you're talking about, they will be more open to talking to you. You'll seem believable. So it's a really good idea to mar the two. You get education and you talk to them about it. Yeah, talk about a family, personal, Uncle John, what happened to him. It's also really good because if there's a history of substance use in the family, they need to know this, because then they are more prone to having problems themselves, and they need this information. So thank you for sharing on those two questions. So I am pretty much done with my presentation. My work is 100% funded by the Office of Traffic and Safety for MAD. Here is my contact information. I will literally speak to anybody, to any adults, any group of young people. I will ask you to do one more thing for me. If you can do this post survey, you'll see it's exactly the same, yes, as the pre-survey, but just scan the QR code, answer the questions. It really, again, helps us out. And as I said, I will make those Power Parent handbooks available. We also have a lot of other resources too on the website, on the mad.org website, just so So hopefully you have all gotten to scan that QR code. Give like another second.
And then Jamie, if I can just interject, there was one question I think maybe you should answer in the chat, and it is, so what do you do if you know your teen is smoking and drinking?
I would come from, again, a caring place. That's where you want to approach the conversation with them, that you are concerned about their safety, their welfare, their future, their success in life right now, because they want you to be there with them. And again, this is what I've heard from the young people from the presentations that I've done with students and with young people. They want a non-judgmental, they want open, caring. So if you approach like that and you say why you're concerned about it and what you see possibly could lead to, that's the best approach, I would say, to start with. And what coming from the mouths of babes, what they think works. So
okay, that's a great answer. I would like to just add on to that, and this would be something I was going to talk about in my presentation, but good time to do it now. There are some really good resources, and I have them as one of the two of the resources at the end of my presentation. One of them is NIDA for Teens, NIDA for Teens, and you'll see the link to that at the end of my presentation, as I mentioned. But sending them there because there they are approaching substance use from a very scientific position. And so they do talk about all the different substances, and it's really a great educational place for teens to go if you can get them to visit that. Secondly, if you have some real concerns brewing, they're using, and you're starting to see some exhibited behaviors, there's another place you can go, and that is to the Partnership to End Addiction. And I know that sounds probably pretty heavy, but basically there are two organizations that came together, and one of them was basically the Partnership for Drug Safe America originally, and that it evolved over time to be different things. But drugfree.org is a great place for parents to go. It's all about parents and grandparents and even teachers. And there's a hotline. It's available to parents like Monday through Friday during regular hours, but you can actually literally talk to very specially trained other parents who've been through substance use with their kids. So it's a really, really good place to go if you really just need anonymous counseling, no cost. It's just a really excellent resource, period, for parents, bottom line. So should I go ahead and move on then?
Yes, thank you, April.
Okay,
Yes, go ahead, April.
great. So we're going to be talking in this segment of the presentation about prescription drug and fentanyl safety. So I just want to start by saying everything that Jamie talked about how to be a good parent and the things that she offered as suggestions, etc., really apply to this topic as well. These are substances as well that youth do gravitate to for different reasons. And so it's really, really important right now because overdose is at its highest point. You may have heard in our country, and prescription drugs and fentanyl absolutely are contributing to that. So this is me, just founder and the executive director of the National Coalition Against Prescription Drug Abuse, NCAPDA for short. And I just want to start by saying that the reason for me starting the organization back in 2010 and following that up 2 years later by founding the Contra Costa County Meds Coalition and running that until just earlier this year was the passing of my son Joey that you're seeing photos of here. So we live in San Ramon, came up here from Southern California when Joey was entering 3rd grade. He went all the way through, 12th grade, graduated from Cal High here in San Ramon and went off to Arizona State University. Joey was 5 months away from graduating from Arizona State when we got that call that no parent wants to get. And that was to let us know that he had been found in his off-campus apartment where he lived with a couple of his friends. And downstream, we learned that he had died from a prescription drug overdose. We were first, of course, as you can imagine, just absolutely just devastated at having lost this amazing young man who had all the potential in the world. But secondly, we were shocked to learn that it was from prescription drugs and the kinds of prescription drugs that we had never really had any experience with in our family. But I learned after the fact, were prescribed to him by a doctor. Unfortunately, he mixed what he had been prescribed with alcohol. I've learned since that there is a combination effect, and some of these medications, the ones we're going to talk about, there can be a combo effect where it doesn't take much and people can literally pass away, as Joey did. A pill of Xanax, for instance, a pill and a half of oxycodone, which is a painkiller, and some alcohol just over the legal limit, for driving was enough to take his life. So as I'm talking to my friends, my family, other people that I knew and worked with, they didn't know anything more about this prescription drug phenomenon than I did. I really felt compelled to, share Joey's story, our family's story, the impact it's had on us. And I've been doing it ever since to try to get attention applied to what is a pretty low perception of harm when it comes to prescription drugs. And at the point that Joey passed away in 2009, what I came to learn was this was becoming a very big problem in our country. Prescription drug abuse from about 2009 until I would say probably 2016 was like the number one cause of overdose death back in that time frame. And people were getting hooked on opioids, in particular painkillers. And we still have an opioid crisis. It's evolved to include fentanyl now, and we're going to talk about that. But what I want to say is that the reason why I combine the discussion about prescription drugs and fentanyl will be really obvious as we go through my presentation. There's an absolute link. We have a national epidemic in our country. Overdose deaths skyrocketed. We saw 107,622, an average of almost 300 people a day dying from prescription drugs, and over 80,000 of those were from opioids. And a big percentage of those were from fentanyl. So I like this chart. It's getting to be a little outdated, but the phenomenon and the trajectory is still the same. So we started seeing around 2013 that fentanyl in particular was becoming a bigger and bigger problem. Cocaine was starting to increase, it had been kind of flatlined, but it started increasing. Prescription drugs, interestingly, started to go down, but that was because we started getting more controls over the doctor, educating doctors and getting systems in place that made it harder for people to doctor shop and go to multiple doctors to get the opioids that they had become addicted to. So that started declining. That doesn't mean the problem's gone away. Prescription drugs are definitely still an issue. But even looking at heroin, that has actually gone down. The go-to drug right now is really fentanyl. It's because it's so powerful. It's so easy to manufacture. Precursor chemicals that come in from China are used to manufacture it. It's super cheap compared to heroin, where heroin, you have to grow poppies, you have to cultivate them, you have to harvest them, you have to extract the heroin from them. It takes a lot more effort for the drug cartels to get the heroin together. Fentanyl, get me some chemicals, I can make it, and I can get it out there in various forms. So that has become the biggest problem. So we've got the data, and I like to show this, this photo every presentation, because the numbers really tell a story, and our coalitions both do a lot of data gathering and analysis to determine, where are the problems in our counties, local counties, which particular city or neighborhood is being impacted the most, and we do what we can to target those with the work we do. But for me, it is individual, people, as you see here. These are, family members, these are loved ones, they're friends. In some cases, we have two brothers, as in the case of these two boys and these two boys, they're brothers that died within a couple of years of each other. Now I know families that have lost 3 young people, or maybe it's a parent and kids. It's just grown to be an enormous problem. And I think now, unlike when I first started work on this topic, and I didn't really encounter too many people that had been impacted like our family had been. Now that's not the case. Almost everybody knows somebody that has lost a life or a loved one, or is otherwise impacted by the substance use disorder that the person has developed, that they care a lot about. So the common misconception when we look at prescription drugs is really that people think they're safer than illegal drugs because the doctor prescribed them. But I've learned the hard way that they can be just as deadly, they can be just as addictive, and certainly illegal, especially when sold to someone else. So drug dealers, that's still considered a felony. Also, I've certainly learned, again, personally, that there are no boundaries. High-performing students and athletes can definitely be victims, as well as these other categories of individuals. I would never in my life have believed that I would have lost my son to this kind of an issue. It absolutely came out of nowhere. He was a strong athlete all the way through high school, and certainly a great student. So there was just no indicators of any kind of an issue coming up. And if he hadn't had that prescription of the medications he was given, I really absolutely believe he would still be here. Or otherwise, if at least somebody had Narcan on hand, we'll be talking about that as an overdose remedy.
April?
Yes.
Somebody asked, what was the medication?
That my son passed away from?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, okay. And I did mention that, but I'll say it again. So Xanax, which is an anti-anxiety medication, he had the equivalent in his system of 1 pill. The other medication was a painkiller, an opioid, which was in his case roxicodone, which is the same as oxycodone. And he had about 1.5 pills equivalent of that in a system. And his alcohol level, again, was just over the driving level. He shouldn't have been behind a wheel of a car, but none of those individually would have been as impacting as they were because of that combination or multiplier effect. because they're all central nervous system depressants. And that means they individually naturally slow down your breathing, and collectively they can stop it, as was the case with Joey. So, and especially for somebody like our young kids that are naive to these medications, their bodies haven't adapted to them. They don't have a tolerance for them. And that's why it can take so little to have them die from an overdose, because the breathing just shuts down. So the community impact is all of these things. Certainly, you know, the overdose deaths are impacting everybody in the community, and crime, any one of us can be a victim of at any given time, because the reality is when people have a substance use disorder, and especially an opioid use disorder, they'll do anything to avoid going into a withdrawal state, because it makes them feel like they're just going to literally die. They feel so awful. So they get you know, into trouble often. Somebody that has an opioid use disorder often ends up with the criminal record, because they're breaking into cars or homes, they're stealing, they're doing things that, you know, cause them to end up with a criminal record that can be really hard down path too for them to deal with in terms of getting jobs, etc. Substance use disorder is all around us. Every community is impacted by this. Families, because of the stigma associated with substance use disorder or addiction, they don't want to talk about it. They're afraid to even sometimes look for help for their person, because they don't want to have to, you know, have scrutiny and have people think badly of their family. So, you know, that's something we've got to fix. The stigma has to go away, because of, you know, the substance use disorder of any sort, you can recover from, but you almost always need professional help. It is really hard to break free from it, especially I think opioids. That particular substance can be a really, really difficult challenge. And then, of course, as Jamie certainly mentioned, drug driving. I mean, it can be drunk driving, but it can also be drug driving. These kinds of drugs we're talking about can impair you. They can cause you to be in a different state and really not in a place to drive safely, bottom line. And any one of us can be a victim of an accident in that case. And of course, the cost to our country is just enormous. The personal risk, you know, apart from substance use disorder, you know, we're looking at HIV, AIDS, all these different kinds of health issues. As the drug problem increases in our country, so do these health issues. It's costing an enormous amount, you know, to manage these. And those are just the tip of the iceberg, because like for opioids, you can have all kinds of other issues that develop as a result of your usage. So it's more than just these transmittable diseases. So for parents, I think it's really important for you to know that there are some signs of use or abuse, and they tend to fall in these two categories, either behavioral or physical. And so the behavioral ones are maybe a little bit different or a little bit harder to detect, but they're there. I know that some parents really just, you know, get a little confused, because they don't really know for sure if maybe there's an issue going on, or if it's just teenage behavior, because some of these may, you know, kind of look like that. But what I've been told, and I really believe has to be the truth, is that you're looking for maybe changes, you know, that, you know, notable changes, let's say, lack of personal grooming, for instance, you know, having somebody that, you know, is routinely taking showers and really paying attention to how they look, and all of a sudden that just seems to change. Or they're hanging out with different people. That can be a real trigger also to a parent to really kind of dig in and see what's going on. You know, the kids they used to hang out with, or the things they used to love to do, they're just not doing those anymore. They're wanting to sleep all the time. Whatever that might look like. In terms of physical stuff, you can really, you know, physically see deterioration in their appearance or grooming. You can see them maybe slurring in their speech or not able to walk, you know, in a straight line per se. So impaired coordination, and certainly, you know, any kind of odor on the clothing, checking their car or their bedroom and seeing, you know, maybe some unusual things going on there. Also, just looking at their eyes, the pupils, if they're pinpoint or really, really tiny, can be indicative of, opioids being on board. Otherwise, larger than usual would be suggestive of a stimulant of some sort, maybe Adderall or Ritalin, or even methamphetamine. So moving over to risk factors, I like to just gloss through these really quickly. I give a lot of presentations in classrooms, typically to ninth grade health class students, and I really spend a little bit of time on this page, more than I really have tonight probably. But the family history of substance use disorder or addiction of any kind at all, even tobacco, people smoke cigarettes, certainly marijuana, any of the substances, that puts your young person at a higher risk than somebody that doesn't have that in their family, and especially a close genetic connection to someone who has that kind of a problem going on. And then first use, I think Jamie did a great job of talking about the brain development and the fact that their brains aren't really fully developed until they're around 25 years old, sometimes a little bit less or a little bit more than that. But as they start taking substances in, there is a chemical change, especially with these prescription drugs. And it could really stimulate mental health disorders. It could, mental health disorders can do the same, the reverse also. And people can try to self-medicate out of their mental health condition by using, but really stressing with young kids that brain of yours is the most important thing you've got going on, and you want to protect it. And you are running a risk of triggering, schizophrenia and all sorts of other different mental health issues if you are using these drugs. And the earlier use, the more possibility there is with that. And then, of course, childhood traumas of any sort, things that we as adults might not consider to be so traumatic. I think that we're seeing more and more health issues develop. We had the pandemic and all sorts of things that occurred within that setting for young people as well as adults. I think we really have to tune into. I've personally taken, and I really highly suggest any of you who have the ability to connect with this to do so. Mental health first aid is becoming a bigger and bigger thing out there. I don't know if the school, if you guys offer it at Lowell, at your school or not, but if you have an opportunity, I found it really eye-opening to help you really kind of take a look at your child and with maybe different eyes, and really looking for behaviors that might be suggestive of a mental health issue of some sort going on, and trying to nip it in the bud as early as you can to make sure you keep that conversation going so you can really explore that with them. I think is really important. If you have a need for that and want that, you can also connect with me, and I can see what I can do to connect you with that if it's not offered at your school. These are where the places where prescription medication really is found most usually. So the majority of abusers or misusers or whatever you want to call them are going to get them in their home medicine cabinets. Unfortunately, most people are not thinking to lock up their medications as they should. Family, friends, those medicine cabinets. At the core, these come, of course, through our medical providers, including our dentists. You have an emergency situation, they're likely going to be prescribed. If there's a pain issue, it's going to be opioids, more than likely. There are internet pharmacies, and not all of them are legit. And if our kids have credit cards, they can go shopping there. They can also go onto social media sites, and that's the number one place now where they are connecting with fentanyl, especially. They're going to look for the pills, the medications that are most abused, and what they are getting is laced with fentanyl, very possibly. These I'm going to go through pretty quickly because I'm running out of time here, but these painkillers, sedatives, and prescription stimulants.
Oh, April, if you
Yes.
need additional time to get through all the information, that's fine.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'll try though to get through this, because the presentation will be available through a recording, so it will be something that you can view later. So when it comes to benzodiazepines, I have Xanax highlighted here on this slide, and that's really because it is really commonly abused by our young teens. They think of it as a chill pill, like no big deal medication. And so this happens to be one of those drugs that they're looking for on the social media sites. So Xanax, if you have that in your house, you need to lock it up because people are looking for it. Young people, and that's not just young people, it can be adults as well. This is a very misused and abused and sought after medication. It can be really dangerous though. You can develop a quick dependency on it. You can overdose on it, especially when you take too much or you mix it with alcohol and or opioids of any sort. Also, if once you become dependent on it, you can have lethal seizures if you come off of it too quickly. You have to be weaned off of it very carefully, and it can take weeks or even months and sometimes years to come off, depending on how dependent your body becomes on it. So we want to keep kids away from all of these medications. These are typically like Valium, Xanax, and Ativan. Those are used for anti-anxiety purposes. And then Ambien would be an example of a sleep aid for somebody that has chronic insomnia, but it has its problems too. All of these medications also tend to have an amnesiac effect. And what that means is that you're not going to remember necessarily what happened to you the next morning, let's just say. Xanax in particular can be used as a date rape drug. So we always try to make sure our girls know to be careful and, stay away from that one. We also then move over to the stimulants, and I highlighted Adderall. For those students or young people who do not have ADHD or ADD, which is those conditions would be the legitimate purpose for which these medications would be prescribed. If somebody that doesn't have either of those two conditions takes this medication, it will have the opposite effect. Instead of calming them down and helping them focus, it actually can stimulate all these different things, your heart rate, your blood pressure, all these different things. And it can cause, worst case, a heart attack, seizure, substance use disorder. It can be addictive. And then these other things over to the right, chronic insomnia, and we can see angry outbursts, etc. So this is not something we want. Those of our young people who do have a legitimate prescription and they do need it to manage their condition, we don't want them selling or giving this medication to somebody else. And that's something I talk to them about when I'm presenting in a classroom. Cough medicine and cold medicine. This is also commonly abused by young people. The cough medicine you'd walk into a pharmacy and get, it has alcohol in it. It's not that much, but what they do is they drink a lot of it. And typically, because it doesn't taste that good, it's really pretty strong. They'll mix soda with it. They'll put candy in it to make it taste better. And then they just drink large quantities of it. The same is true for the cough medicine that is prescribed. That has codeine in it, though. Codeine is an opioid. So you can see what the potential effects are. We do have kids that end up in the ER because they're having hallucinations and all these different conditions. They're disoriented, whatever. They will probably survive, but I do know parents who have lost their kids to overdose too. So this isn't something we want our kids playing around with. And then finally, we have painkillers of the opioids. And these are, of course, commonly, again, abused. They're commonly prescribed. The strongest message I could have for parents is that if you have a child who has to have their wisdom teeth removed, surgically removed, or they have a sports injury, they go to the doctor or a dentist, you really want to try to minimize, if not avoid, these completely, because I've talked to tons of kids that have, as adults, they let me know that they got prescribed as a young person, and that was the beginning of their opioid use disorder. The bottom line is there are some really good over-the-counter pain treatments. It would be Advil, Motrin, it would be Tylenol, combinations of those. And that can be almost, if not as effective as these painkillers. But a doctor is still very likely to prescribe them if they think that there's a need for it. And bottom line is you just have to be really, really careful with them. The longer they're taking these, the more likely they're going to develop that opioid use disorder. So we just want to try to just be super, super careful with these. And then that moves us over to the discussion about the fentanyl. So fentanyl comes in two forms, either in the powder form, and you can see that in this penny. This is enough to kill somebody. It's just a couple of little, micrograms. So that isn't something that we're going to see our young people so much encounter unless they're getting illegal drugs like cocaine, heroin, everything pretty much. All of the illegal drugs on the street right now are pretty much suspect. Let's just say they are likely going to be tainted with fentanyl. And so we just need to make sure that kids know, cocaine, any of that stuff can be a real problem. But more than likely, our young people are going to get a hold of, we call them fentanyls. And that's going to look like this pill over here. This is a counterfeit oxycodone pill, an opioid. And you really can't tell the difference. Even the law enforcement experts, they have to run this stuff usually through, the lab, because they are making them look just like the real thing. The pills that they get over the internet in any way, the social media platforms or whatever, they will look just like the real thing. They may be complete duds, meaning they won't have anything in it. It may be, they use all kinds of other substances to throw these pills together. They will throw some amount of fentanyl in, or they may just be fake pills completely. You just don't know. So they don't want it. You absolutely have to let them know that they can't go shopping for this stuff online, because I think they said like about 3 out of 7, I believe, pills that were tested by the DEA pretty recently had enough fentanyl to kill somebody. You just don't know. You're totally playing Russian roulette. I want to mention the rainbow fentanyl. You may have seen in the news, there's a big thing out right now about the fentanyl, the rainbow fentanyl. It basically is colored pills. They may have the M on it, meaning basically the oxycodone, that's kind of a significant for them. But there's also a little bit of a scare going on right now saying, okay, we have Halloween coming around the corner. There's a concern about candy laced with fentanyl showing up, in the trick-or-treat environment. And the research I've done the last couple of days on this is suggesting that it's really not to be a huge concern for parents. You absolutely want to make sure you're checking candy and you're really careful about it. But what they have found so far, where the fentanyl, the rainbow fentanyl, was showing up in candy containers, it was really to smuggle the stuff into our country. It really wasn't to distribute it widely to kids. That's really not the purpose. Drug dealers are not going to give this stuff away for free. They want money for it. So the word that I'm getting from our professionals, our DEA, et cetera, is that, this is really one of those kind of scary myths out there right now. But that being said, we always want to make sure our candy's safe, and just do your usual check on that. So then moving over real quickly, we've got overdose rescue kits. It's naloxone is the medication that can literally overturn an overdose that's in progress if opioids are at least part of the overdose mixture. And so it comes in multiple forms. We've got the 4 milligram nasal spray, an 8 milligram nasal spray. I literally just picked up today about 300 units of this. We also have an intramuscular injectable. This one you have to assemble, and you actually have to literally plunge a needle into a muscle group. It's not intravenous delivery, but rather muscular. So the sprays are really the most effective and really easiest delivery system. So that's what our organization literally gives out. We like to educate people, of course, about what does an overdose look like. These are the basic signs. If they're not responsive, I would say the breathing and the heartbeat slow or stopped is a really good indicator. One of the most important ones, and probably the fingernails or lips turning blue or purplish black, depending on skin tone. Those are the keys, especially if it's a young person. You need to probably pretty much assume it's an overdose. You want to try to rouse the person, of course, and wake them up. One of the ways to do that just to see if they're really going to be able to become alert again or not without intervention, is to do the sternal rub. You just take your knuckles and rub, as you see on this picture. If you try that yourself, you'll see that you can't really tolerate too much without saying, hey, stop. So that would be the first thing you'd want to do after, I shouldn't say first, but just try to rouse them. You shake them, yell at them, whatever, and then, do that knuckle rub and see what happens. If you think that you've got an emergency on your hands, you'd of course want to call 911. And to administer the Narcan, it's super simple. You just remove it from its packaging, and that's easy to do. Just, peel off the backing, a little foil backing, and then you're going to put that nozzle up into their nostril and push the pen forward. You're going to repeat that process with the other cartridge. All the kits come with at least 2. All of ours come with 2. Some other organizations are starting to give 3 out because it can take more than 2 to reverse a fentanyl overdose, but repeat it in 2 to 5 minutes. By then, hopefully EMS is showing up so they can take over from you. If they're not breathing at all, you're going to want to do what you would do in another situation. If they're drowning victim or whatever, you're going to want to give them rescue breathing. And in our kits, we actually have a breathing guard, so you don't have to have that mouth-to-mouth contact. You want to put them in this rescue position, so bent knee and arm, hand supporting their head, just so that their nose and the mouth are remaining available as possible to take in that life-saving oxygen. Naloxone is only going to last for 30 to 90 minutes, and that means they could actually overdose again, depending on how much of the opioid they have in their system. You want to make sure you stay with them if they won't go to the ER. If it's your child, they're going to go to the ER. You need to get them there because they can stabilize them and make sure that they don't have a subsequent overdose as the naloxone wears off. Naloxone is only going to work on opioid related overdoses, but like with my son, he had opioids, but he had other substances. I am convinced that if naloxone had been administered, though, just stripping out that opioid would have been enough to reestablish his breathing, and he would have been okay. So just keep that in mind. You can't hurt anybody if you administer it. It's a medication that only works on opioids, and it's not going to hurt you. So if in doubt, just use it. We think that everybody, and I would say especially parents of teens these days, why not get naloxone and just have it on hand just in case. Overdoses often happen right in the house. Kids go out, they get pills, they come back, they may use them in their own bedroom. You want to have it on hand. And this is how you can get it. If you don't want to connect with us, and you're welcome to do that, we do have it on hand. You can actually get it mailed to you by going on naloxoneforall.org, and they will literally mail, I believe, at least 2 cartridges to you, and maybe 3. What you can do from this point on is just continue to educate yourself. Don't think that it can't happen in your family, please. It just, kids do unpredictable things, and you just want to always be, up to speed on what's going on. Lock up those medications and dispose of the ones you don't need anymore. And you can do that typically at the police station. Also, CVS's in Contra Costa County, all of them have drop-off boxes. And Safeways do now too. The Kaiser facilities typically have them as well in their lobbies. Just make sure also when you're in front of the doctor, you're modeling good drug behavior. Ask about the side effects and make sure that you find alternatives if you learn that the medication can be addictive. Always read the labels, and that would be even for over-the-counter medications. I want you to know that we do have a youth ambassador program, and if you think your child might be interested in doing volunteer work with us, looks great on their resumes, for jobs and all obviously college apps. So we do have one girl that is from Las Lomas on our team, and every one of them works to do peer-to-peer education and other kinds of things. These are the parent resources that I mentioned before, at least in the Partnership to End Addiction and NIDA for Teens. I also suggest you go to songforcharlie.org because they have great information, including videos, very short videos that you may want your teens to watch that are related specifically to the fentanyls. And this is how you contact us if you have any questions at all. All of those contact, the phone number and the email address, they come directly to me. So with that, I can answer any questions as well as Jamie. I'm sure if there's anything else that we can share out with you.
There weren't any other questions in the Q&A, just FYI.
Okay, I see one comment, maybe this was before I ended up talking. Yeah, I think it was. I thought the presentation was about fentanyl. I think we talked about that too, so. All right, is there anything else we can do?
No, I think that was wonderful. Thank you so much, April and Jamie, for presenting tonight on this important topic. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, all of you, for attending as well. Our next parent education night is going to be on November 15th. It's going to be a presentation by COPE, which is Counseling Options in Parent Education. It's going to be all about recognizing depression and anxiety in yourself and your teen. So thank you again to both of you for coming, and thank you guys as well for attending. Have a great evening.
Good night.